My daughter evicted me at noon. The house was still holding its breath from the funeral, 7 weeks of flowers turning to dust, when I heard suitcase wheels scuff across the hardwood. The sound was too cheerful for grief, like a hotel lobby had wandered into my living room. Lydia didn't hug me. She lifted a folder instead. Grant hovered behind her, crisp as a brochure, hand on another suitcase like a bellhop who billed by the hour. Lydia's voice was soft, PR soft, sponsor dinner soft. She told me Dad, she said Dad, not Thomas, had left the estate to her for streamlining. She used that word the same way she uses mindful, as if kindness could be manufactured. I looked at the paper. It wasn't the will I'd filed after the funeral. I know filing. I was a registrar for 30 years. I can alphabetize grief. The signatures didn't breathe like Thomas's, they posed. My hands trembled anyway. Widow hands do that, like a metronome you can't shut off. Lydia smiled like a nurse. Mom, you'll be more comfortable somewhere quiet while we sort everything. Quiet. She meant invisible. Grant chimed in about fiduciary prudence and exposure. He has a way of turning nouns into handcuffs. He opened the hall closet without asking and started pulling my coats. The one Thomas bought me in a March snowstorm slipped free like a skin. I tried a sentence that felt ridiculous even as it left my mouth. I live here. Lydia stroked the folder. She said, Dad wanted me to handle it. The word wanted did a lot of heavy lifting. They worked in tandem, zippers, drawers, the measured clack of heels. My hallway became a conveyor belt. I followed, small and polite in my own doorway. Grief teaches you to be gentle with everyone but yourself. Why do we do that? By 2, the kitchen looked staged, no magnets, no notes, just a bowl of lemons like a magazine spread. Lydia placed $240 on the counter as though she were tipping a housekeeper. For a few nights, she said. Grant added that he'd found a motor lodge on Ogden Avenue, very clean, 45, actually 55 a night with tax. He quoted the price like he'd negotiated mercy. I put the money in my wallet because I still respect paper. Then I asked, softly, if we could stop at the cemetery. Lydia's smile stuttered, then resumed. Another day, she murmured. My grief was off schedule. They drove. The sky over Riverside was that thin Midwestern blue that makes every branch look honest. I watched our street slide past, the maple that dripped gold in October, the neighbor's porch swing still crooked from a summer storm. My house grew smaller in the side mirror, neat and dignified, like it was trying not to make a scene. The motor lodge smelled like bleach and old coffee. The front desk clerk didn't look up. Grant handled the key card. He kept his voice low, as if he were ashamed of the rate, not the act. Lydia touched my elbow the way people touch hot pans. Mom, this is temporary. We're protecting you. Protecting me from what? My name on my deed? In the room, a window unit hummed. The bedspread had that flamingo pattern every budget motel orders by the mile. Lydia set my suitcase on the rack and said, rest. I'll call tomorrow. It sounded like a courtesy notice before a shut-off. She kissed the air near my cheek and fled. Grant offered a brisk nod, he nods the way other men apologize. The door shut. The silence made a low, embarrassing sound in my chest. I didn't cry at Thomas's funeral. I cried at the motor lodge. Then I stopped. I sat on the edge of the bed and counted the money out loud because numbers are calming. 240. I placed the key card beside it like a very small, very ugly trophy. A laugh, mine, escaped, short and wrong. Streamlining, I said to the empty room, and the word sounded like a train cutting through town at night, fast, indifferent, gone. Grief is heavy, but humiliation is loud. You can't think over it. You can only breathe under it until it tires itself out. I made tea with the in-room packet and drank something the color of rust. Then I opened Thomas's old contacts on my phone. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for procedure. There he was, Samuel Price. Precise Samuel with the tidy handwriting, the man who never rushed Thomas, not even when everyone else did. Samuel doesn't do soft voices. He does truth like a scalpel. I didn't call. Not yet. I wanted the decision to be mine in the morning light, not a late-day reflex. I lined up the money, the key, my phone, like a tiny ceremony, like a registrar setting out forms for a difficult enrollment. Outside, a train horn lifted and faded. I pictured Lydia now, back in my kitchen, opening drawers, claiming intention like property. Would you have begged in the parking lot? Would you have fought on the welcome mat and let them call it hysteria? I chose stillness. Not surrender, stillness. Stillness is where plans are born. I set an alarm for 7 a.m., whispered Thomas's name once, and turned off the light. The room went black except for a thin red glow from the AC. It looked like a recording light on a camera. Tomorrow, I told myself, I start the paperwork on my own life. I woke before the alarm, already sitting up. The motel air was thin and metallic, like I'd slept inside a vending machine. I made the rust-colored tea again, put on the coat that no longer smelled like Thomas, and walked out to the parking lot as if the asphalt were a hallway I'd known for years. Samuel answered on the second ring. No music on hold, no receptionist wall. Just his deliberate voice, clean as a ruler. He told me to come now. I liked the word now. It doesn't leave room for panic. Price and Company lives in an old brick building above a bakery that refuses to die. Butter and lemon polish met me on the stairs. Samuel opened his door himself. He looked the way paper looks when someone respects it, square, crisp, no wasted corners. He took my coat, set it on a chair, and placed a thick red folder between us like a heartbeat. He didn't start with condolences. He started with procedure. He slid out a document wrapped in clear sleeves, the signatures resting where they belonged instead of posing. This is Thomas's last will and testament, he said, quiet. Executed 11 months before he died. Filed with the court. Original in my fireproof and in the clerk's vault. His pen tapped a notarization stamp that had nothing to prove. I read the words that moved my life, the Riverbend house, mine, unencumbered. 75% of assets, mine, held outright, approximately $28 million based on last quarter valuations. My brain tried to make that number into groceries and failed. It just sat there, enormous and indifferent. Then the trust. 25% set aside for Lydia, approximately $11.5 million, distributed over time. I reached for the page without thinking. The trust wasn't punishment, it was instruction written in law. Distributions shall be made, it said, conditional upon demonstrable treatment of Evelyn Hart with dignity and without coercion, intimidation, or public disparagement. The words dignity and coercion stood up like soldiers. Samuel let me read twice. He didn't narrate. He watched, present, not pressing. My hand steadied without asking permission. The clause named him as trustee with discretion to withhold distributions if the condition failed. I pictured Lydia's suitcase wheels scraping my hall. I pictured the motel flamingos. Discretion looked less like a legal term and more like a closed door. He slid another sheet forward, the will Lydia waived yesterday. He didn't need to explain. The paper was wrong before the ink even tried. Fonts argued, margins wandered, Thomas's signature wore the mask of itself. Filed nowhere, Samuel said. Origin ambiguous. He didn't say forgery. He didn't have to. The word floated between us, heavy and obvious. I felt a small laugh rise and behave itself. I asked if Thomas had told him about the condition. Samuel nodded once. Thomas had said he wanted love to be measurable when love failed to be visible. It sounded like him, practical romance. We moved from truth to action like stepping stones. Samuel printed certified copies, embossed them with a brass seal that clicked like a small, satisfied lock. He drafted a notice to the probate clerk and queued filings that looked like traffic lights lining up green. My name, properly spelled, looked powerful in black ink. Then he leaned back, fingers templed. Lydia's conduct yesterday, he said, meets the conditions negative triggers. At my discretion, distributions are suspended pending review. He paused, letting the word suspended land. And the documents they used to remove you, those are likely criminal matters. The room quieted in that way rooms do before a storm. He offered a card with a second name, Detective Naomi Perez, Financial Crimes. He didn't give me a speech about justice, he gave me a process map. Banks, utilities, title, places where lies try to breathe. He told me what could be frozen, what could be held, what could be reversed. Each verb felt like a handrail. I asked the question that had been purring in my throat since the motor lodge. What if Lydia says she was concerned? Samuel's mouth didn't move. Concern, he said, does not relocate a widow to a $55 motel. The sentence sat in the room like furniture nobody could pretend not to see. We signed what could be signed. He emailed what could be emailed. He walked me to the door with the patience of men who practice patience the way others practice piano. On the stairs, the bakery sent up a batch of something warm. My stomach remembered it existed. I hadn't felt hunger since the graveside, grief makes food theoretical. On the sidewalk, I stopped. The winter sun over Riverside had that hospital light again, too honest, too bright. People walked past with coffees and earbuds, carrying Tuesdays like nothing was happening. I dialed Lydia. She didn't answer. Good. I didn't want a voice, I wanted a record. Then I called the number on Samuel's card. A calm woman answered and introduced herself as Detective Perez. Her voice had the steadiness of someone who's chased panic out of rooms for a living. I told her I had certified documents and a red folder that could bite. She told me to come by that afternoon, bring everything, and be prepared to swear to my own name. I said I could do that. I've been doing that my whole life. Back at the motor lodge, I packed the flamingos back into their drawer. I lined up the money, the key, the card. Numbers felt less like comfort and more like tools. Would you have waited for them to be kind? Or would you have let the system do the speaking? By 3 o'clock, the folder was in my lap, the car heater clicking, my hand steady. Somewhere in the city, Lydia's credit cards were still swiping. Not for long. I raised my right hand and swore to my own name. Detective Perez watched my mouth shape each syllable like she could weigh truth by consonants. The precinct smelled like coffee gone brave and printer toner. She slid a form toward me, square and neat, and asked me to mark the places where Lydia's concern had looked like eviction. We moved with intent, not drama. Perez scanned Samuel's certified copies, capturing the seals like evidence of gravity. She called a bank liaison on speaker. The woman on the line spoke with the calm of someone who has seen every trick twice. Receiving, she said. Verifying. Her keyboard made a soft, ruthless music. Another call. A different bank. Hold requested on accounts associated with disputed documentation. Perez didn't raise her voice, she raised her standards. She read numbers cleanly, spelled my name, spelled Lydia's. She used the word purported the way a surgeon uses incision. Then she muted the call and looked at me. You'll keep your phone on. If Lydia contacts you, don't argue. Don't explain. Record if you must. Respond once, calmly. Her tone made breathing feel like procedure. A tech rolled in a cart that beeped like a sleepy hospital monitor. He took photos of the forged will beside the real one. He blew up the so-called notary stamp. Perez tilted her head. Expired 5 years ago, she noted. And the stamp's registration belongs to a dental office in Berwyn. She didn't smile. I did, a little. Forgers forget that paper has a memory. We filed a fraud alert with the county recorder. Perez dictated, and a clerk across town stapled my life to a pause button. Title on the Riverbend property flagged pending verification, the clerk read back. Utilities next, gas, water, electric. Any transfer orders? Perez asked. The utility agent hesitated, then confirmed last night's call from a man using Grant's cheerful radio voice, requesting expedited guardianship access. That phrase clanged like silverware in a garbage disposal. By noon, institutional gears caught. My phone began announcing the future. Bank 1, temporary administrative hold placed. Bank 2, inconsistent documentation, compliance review initiated. The notifications felt like air returning to a room. I pictured Lydia somewhere glossy. She loves lunches where the napkins have opinions. I pictured her handing over a card with a rehearsed laugh. Then I pictured the terminal blinking declined like a tiny verdict. Concern doesn't bounce at checkout. Perez slid a simple sentence across the table, a statement authorizing law enforcement to communicate with the financial institutions as my agent. You're choosing, she said, because words matter. I signed. The pen felt heavier than it looked. We ate vending machine almonds like they were evidence. Perez outlined the rest with clean lines: interviews likely, seizures possible, attorney notification standard. Your silence is not consent, she said. Your stillness yesterday is not today. She had a gift for untangling shame from facts. My phone rang. Lydia. The name bloomed on the screen like a bruise. Perez met my eyes and nodded once. Answer, record, stay level. I swiped. Silence first, the kind that carries a room's color. Then Lydia's inhale, thin and sharp. She began with my name, stretched into a question. She said there was a weird error with her cards, the bank was being dramatic, and had I done something impulsive. Impulsive. I felt my heartbeat flatten into a line. I kept my voice small and steady. I told her I'd met with counsel and law enforcement. I told her there were certified copies of Dad's will, properly filed, and that I would be proceeding through legal channels to correct yesterday's events. I didn't say motel. I didn't say flamingos. I said, please direct further questions to my attorney. Her exhale scraped. She tried a softer register, the one she uses at donor breakfasts. She said we could avoid ugly press, that this was a family matter, that Dad had wanted efficiency. She repeated wanted until it meant nothing. I answered like a form. I will not discuss the estate with you outside counsel. I wish you well. My voice surprised me, it sounded like a locked drawer. The mask dropped. She asked if I understood what I was doing. She said words like ungrateful and embarrassing. She said she'd have to adjust things if I insisted. Adjust. Lydia uses euphemisms the way other people use weapons. Would you have defended yourself to a euphemism? Or would you let it clang on the floor and walk around it? I kept my line. I'm proceeding with law enforcement. Then I ended the call. The recording saved itself with a neat little chime, like a receipt printing. Perez didn't applaud. She wrote a time and a sentence, subject contacted, declarant asserted legal process, like a weather report. Then she dialed again, this time a downtown brasserie. Reservation desk. She inquired about Lydia's name, a table for two. The host chirped yes, 115, corner banquette. Perez thanked them, hung up, and raised an eyebrow. If their cards aren't already declining, she said, they will before dessert. A new alert flashed from the county recorder, fraud affidavit received, transfer hold in effect. Another from a bank compliance officer, unusual activity detected, client advised to present in person with counsel. The words were dry, the relief wasn't. My shoulders dropped 2 inches without permission. We filed one more notice, a victim's statement. My handwriting returned to me like a friend from a long trip. I wrote only what mattered. I was removed from my home against my consent, false documents were displayed to justify it, I sought help and would see it through. Perez slid a business card across the table, not hers, another name I didn't know yet. If this escalates past my lane, she said, you'll hear from a federal partner. Keep your phone charged. Keep your answers short. I stepped outside into cold sun and traffic, into Riverside doing its midweek impression of serenity. Somewhere downtown, a waiter approached a corner banquette with a bill that wouldn't clear. Somewhere in my house, winter light moved across walls I knew by muscle memory. Somewhere inside me, a hinge clicked. They meant to erase me with paper. Paper brought me back. I stood on the sidewalk and listened to a train slide through, its horn low and patient, like a promise nobody could rush. By the time the sound faded, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number, a theater of consequences ringing. I let it ring once more, then answered. The unknown number was Perez. Her voice carried traffic and decision. She said uniforms were en route to a downtown brasserie. Another team was walking into Grant's office with a warrant for devices and documents. She told me not to go there. She told me to be at the Riverbend house in 40 minutes with Samuel's papers and my comm. 40 minutes felt like a bridge I'd already crossed. I put the red folder on the passenger seat and drove Ogden like it owed me an apology. The sky wore that thin winter blue that makes honesty look easy. My hands didn't shake. I had procedural air in my lungs. At the house, the maple threw lace against the facade. 2 squad cars sat quiet at the curb, engines ticking. An officer stepped forward with a politeness that had bones. He checked my ID, read the property address aloud like an oath, and nodded toward the door. The lock turned cleanly under my key. I have never loved a sound so much. Inside, the lemons Lydia staged looked like props after the play closed. The light moved across the floor in sheets. I stood very still and listened to the house breathe me back in. Would you have collapsed on the rug? Or would you have straightened your spine and gone room by room? I chose rooms. I photographed everything first, drawers half open, her folder left on the console, his cufflinks abandoned on a dish that wasn't his. I texted the photos to Samuel with a single line, documenting condition upon re-entry. He replied with a period. From him, that's approval. My phone buzzed, Perez again. She spoke in headlines, Lydia contacted at table, informed of investigation, asked to accompany, she attempted to argue policy, not law, cards declined at point of sale, she left with officers without incident. No cuffs, Perez added. Respectful. I could hear forks stop in the background as a lunch crowd adjusted its judgment. 10 minutes later, Grant. He tried to keep his office voice as agents moved through the boutique consultancy like a tide. Laptops opened. A safe appeared from nowhere and then didn't. He asked for time, policy didn't blink. He was escorted out as if he were late for his own meeting. Perez's tone didn't gloat, it recorded. I hung up and breathed like I'd been given back a diaphragm. Then I got to work. Their guest room, my guest room, held a curated still life, silk blouses spaced like exhibit labels, shoes lined in military rows, a vanity tray with serums that promised to lift what choices had lowered. I pulled out contractor bags and labeled boxes. To counsel, Lydia, to counsel, Grant, unknown, photograph first. I wasn't erasing them, I was relocating the fiction. In the kitchen, I put the bowls back where life lives. The lemons went into a drawer to be squeezed into something useful. I set the sturdy mug Thomas always pretended not to like beside the kettle. The house lost its showroom accent and remembered its native language. His study stopped me. Thomas's chair was empty, but not abandoned. Dust held the shape of disuse, not neglect. I ran a finger along the shelf and felt paper's old warmth. Grant had stacked 3 glossy binders on the credenza. Labels crisp, fonts expensive, client onboarding, wealth architecture, legacy pathways. Legacy. The word wobbled. I opened one, slow. Inside, sample flows, shell diagrams that could be templates or camouflage, arrows that moved money like chess. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood the intention, make a maze, sell a map. I photographed pages, closed the binder like I was tucking in a child I didn't trust, and set the stack in a box labeled, to counsel, potential evidence. Would you have peeked and shut it fast? Or would you have let the question stand at the door and looked anyway? Upstairs, I reached our bedroom. The air was different here, quieter, heavier, polite. I opened windows an inch. Winter answered. I made the bed with the old quilt, the one with the uneven stitches that always made Lydia roll her eyes. I pressed my palm to the mattress and counted breaths until mine matched the room's. Then I took out a yellow legal pad and drew the house I wanted to live in. Not a showpiece, mine. Walls washed in softer white, not that icy gallery paint. The dining room turned library with a reading chair that forgives knees. The back den opened with French doors so the maple could visit in spring. The kitchen counters unstaged, warm wood instead of stone that bruises. I wrote floor lamp with golden light, then underlined it twice. I allowed myself one small ceremony. I cleared Lydia's wellness corner, the diffuser that wheezed eucalyptus, the stack of books that confused self-care with self-worship, and set a single photograph on the table instead. Thomas on the porch, an October day, his mouth in that not-quite smile he kept for me. Not a shrine. A reminder. Perez texted a final note, both parties transported, phones seized, devices secured. She'd schedule a formal statement tomorrow and a walkthrough today with an evidence tech to tag anything I'd set aside. You did well, she wrote. 3 words. I let them land. I carried the contractor bags to the garage like I was moving storm clouds out of a room. The house felt taller. My shoulders did, too. When grief loosens its grip, it doesn't apologize, it just leaves your hands free. On the way back in, I found a small envelope tucked under the front mat. Thick paper. No stamp. The handwriting soared and then pressed, old money taught by nuns. Inside, a card with a name I didn't know yet and a phone number written with the confidence of someone who was used to being dialed. The message was simple: we can resolve this quietly. I held the card without liking it. Something in the ink smelled like a museum gala and a threat. I set it on the console beside the red folder, exactly equidistant. Balance matters. The doorbell rang, polite, practiced, 2 chimes and a pause. I looked through the glass and saw a woman's outline on my porch, posture like a board meeting, pearls that caught winter light. I didn't know her face. I knew her last name. Her pearls clicked once when she smiled. Patricia Mercer, she said, voice tempered in boardrooms. The name on the envelope had found its owner. Winter air pressed at my back like a nosy neighbor. I held the door half open and let the cold stay between us. Power prefers warmth. She asked to come in for 5 minutes. I stepped aside exactly 1 step, no more. She moved like someone who had never been told no in daylight. Her perfume was expensive and tired. On the console, the card she'd left waited like a witness. Patricia opened with concern. Not mine, hers. The situation was unpleasant, the optics damaging, the path forward manageable if we act like adults. She set a slim checkbook on the table the way surgeons set scalpels. 2.5 million, immediate cashier's check, in exchange for a few reasonable courtesies: withdraw the complaint, dial down the language, restore family privacy. Her voice made crime sound like clutter. I didn't sit. I set my phone face down and let the recorder watch the ceiling. I asked if she meant her son's forged paperwork or my eviction to a $55 motor lodge. The word motor lodge curdled the air. She blinked, once, as if I'd used profanity in church. She pivoted to legacy. Thomas had been respected in certain circles. Lydia's brand was delicate, Grant's work discreet. I heard the words like small, tin bells, polite, persistent, impossible to ignore. Then came the soft knife, ugly rumors about Thomas's consulting firm, whispers about flows and timing, people who owed her favors in rooms where subpoenas were born. She didn't threaten. She named the weather and waited for me to bring an umbrella. I poured tea for myself and let the kettle click shut. Patricia watched the cup like it might confess. She increased the number without introducing the subject. 5.8 million. The specificity did more work than the digits. She described a donor fund that could be repurposed, a foundation seat with my name gilded on brass, a graceful exit for everyone, I'd keep dignity, she'd keep headlines tidy, Lydia would keep her schedule. Would you sell the silence around your own name if the price felt surgical? I asked one question, why 5.8, not 6? She smoothed a corner of the checkbook like it needed calming. Market realities, contingent pledges, blah blah. The real answer sat in her eyes, because she believed precision felt more believable than kindness. Then the smear silhouette walked in and took a chair. Patricia mentioned compliance gaps at Thomas's firm, hinted at shell companies with ugly owners, alluded to a case file that could make a widow look willfully blind. She said there were ways to persuade an agent that my money was tangled and should be cleansed in public. She said that word, cleansed, like she was laundering not just funds, but memory. I let her talk until the room grew heavy with suggestion. My heartbeat stepped down a level. I pictured the red folder's brass seal. I pictured Perez, precise as a ruler. I pictured Thomas's face in October light and the way he'd said, long ago, that truth isn't loud, it's patient. When Patricia finally paused, I answered like a closed door. I was proceeding through counsel and law enforcement. I would not discuss the estate outside those lanes. I appreciated her visit. I did not accept it. My voice stayed even. Even sounds like a verdict when someone expects tremor. Her look sharpened. Not anger, calculation. She said she admired resolve in older women when it wasn't misdirected. She noted she'd spoken to people who could make phone calls feel like rain. She suggested we were both too old to enjoy public storms. It was a sales pitch woven from weather reports. I walked her to the threshold. She adjusted a glove with a small, efficient tug. You'll hear things, she said, casual as a bank holiday. About Thomas. About where certain invoices led. The pearls clicked again. None of us want that. Her smile asked me to agree with her version of nobody. I opened the door and let the winter answer for me. She crossed the porch without looking back. The maple threw small shadows across her coat. Her car idled at the curb like a waiting verdict, driver already watching the house as if it were a stage. The door shut. The house exhaled. Silence tried to set up camp. I did what I always do with noise pretending to be quiet, I lined up facts. 2 numbers on a table. 2 strategies in one visit, by my mouth, stain my memories. Patricia hadn't just offered money, she'd offered a narrative. I wasn't hungry. My phone buzzed. Not Perez. Not Samuel. A new name, clean and unfamiliar, Nadia Kwan. The voicemail preview was a sentence with edges. I've reviewed your late husband's consulting flows. We need to talk now. The kettle clicked again, though I hadn't touched it. Some rooms make their own documentary soundtrack. I pressed play, and listened to a stranger describe where money goes when it doesn't want to be seen. Nadia's office hummed like a careful engine. No receptionist wall, no framed diploma screaming, just a long table, a laptop glowing, and a whiteboard crowded with arrows that looked too neat to be innocent. She wore a dark sweater and moved with the precision of someone who had learned to read lies and commas. She didn't waste my oxygen. She slid a tablet to me, page 1 already highlighted. I mapped Thomas's consulting flows across 18 months, she said, boy steady. 5 entities repeat. Same registrar, same agent, same Friday afternoon timestamps. She zoomed in on addresses, 3 UPS stores, 1 co-working suite with no desks, 1 mailbox with a fake #200. The font on every invoice was identical even when the logos changed clothes. I watched lines bounce across banks like a pinball with a schedule. Money left a client account labeled Advisory Retainer, hit North Ferry Holdings, split into Maple Bridge Partners and Hera Advisory, then returned 2 weeks later to Riverbend Strategy fees. Round numbers, tidy intervals, memo lines that read like they'd been copied and pasted and exhaled. Paper trying to look like breath. Round-tripping pattern, Nadia said. Classic. Looks like revenue, smells like detergent. She swiped again. Same flow, different mask. Also, Payments consistently sit just under internal review thresholds. Not illegal alone, together, a motif. I felt something cold gather behind my ribs. Thomas was meticulous, he loved clean edges and receipts. But these flows looked like choreography designed to be admired from a distance and misunderstood up close. Nadia kept moving. She showed metadata, identical PDF authors across different vendors, invoice numbers skipping in a way only Excel forgets, not humans. She pulled up a spreadsheet Grant had circulated to prospects, my screenshot from the house box labeled potential evidence, and aligned its wealth architecture steps with the arrows on her board. The overlay snapped in like a lid. Could be staging, she allowed. Could be someone imitating legitimacy and borrowing Thomas's timelines to cloak their own. But any half-awake analyst sees laundering signatures. She didn't dramatize it. She let it sit there, heavy and simple. My mouth tasted like pennies. I thought of Patricia's pearls clicking like a metronome. I thought of Lydia's voice soothing sponsors while she moved me out by the pound. Nadia took a breath, then gave me the sentence that changed the temperature in the room. If IRSCI or the U.S. Attorney decides these are illicit proceeds, they can freeze first and ask questions later. Civil forfeiture. They'll lock accounts, seize devices, file lease pendants on the house. Not forever, maybe. But long enough to make your life very small. I felt my hand go to the red folder like it could pulse back. The house in my head, the softened white walls, the maple visiting through French doors, shrunk to a sketch. Would you cling to a drawing if someone threatened to tear up the paper? Nadia watched me the way doctors watch pulse. I'm not saying Thomas was dirty, she added, words careful. I'm saying the pattern invites suspicion. And your son-in-law built a business selling maps through mazes. That makes your doorstep convenient. She outlined choices like lanes on pavement. 1. Wait, hope Perez's lane holds, react to subpoenas like weather. 2. Walk into federal space before it walks into you. Bring counsel. Bring documentation. Bring your spine. Voluntary cooperation often earns carve-outs, she said. Homestead protection. Living expenses segregated as clean. You demonstrate good faith before anyone names you obstructive. A name slid into the room like a key. I can make an introduction at IRS Criminal Investigation, Nadia said. Agent Dana Whitaker. She doesn't do theater. She does outcomes. The word outcome settled like a chair. I looked at Thomas's photo in my memory, October light, the portrayal, his not quite smile. If he had been part of this dance, had he done it to hide or to help? The question scraped bone. Nadia didn't try to answer it for me. Next steps arrived with the rhythm of procedure. Freeze your own spending beyond essentials. No large transfers. Open no new accounts. Keep every receipt, annotate every date. Copy your device to an external drive and let Perez image it clean. Talk to Samuel before you talk to anyone else. Talk to me if Lydia or Grant approach with a solution, because they will. She printed 2 pages and slid them over. One was a simple timeline, the other was a list of do-nots written like a spell against panic. We both signed the bottom like a handshake with the future. Then she touched the tablet and summoned one more pattern, screenshots from a private group chat she'd recovered off a junior associate's phone at Grant's office. Adapted narrative decks. Draft quotes for me. A slide titled Elder Grace Compromise. I felt something in me smile without warmth. The deal had been designed before the cards declined. Back home, the house smelled faintly of dust and lemon oil, like it had picked dignity over speed. I called Samuel first. He listened, then asked for copies, then said one sentence shaped like a brace, "We'll be proactive." I texted Perez next, "We should talk federal." Her reply was immediate. "Expect a referral call. Keep your ringers on." I carried a mug to the dining room turned draft library and set it down too hard. The china rang like a small gavel. I opened the legal pad to my map of a future kitchen and drew a line through the word marble. I wrote Wormwood again, darker, as if I could anchor hope with ink. Dusk coasted in. The maple scratched the window with a sound like a pencil thinking. I shut the blinds and felt the room pull in close around me, protective but not coddling. I made a list titled "What I Can Control." It was short, stubborn, and honest. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number at first, then the contact app caught up and painted the bruise, Lydia. The text preview kept it glossy, "We can fix this. Tonight. No lawyers." Another bubble arrived before I could inhale. "Grant has a plan that protects everyone. House stays yours." Protection offered by the hands that pushed me into a motel. I didn't answer. I placed the phone face down and watched the red light from the heater blink like a patient heartbeat. Somewhere in the city, phones were being imaged, emails mirrored, passwords guessed right. Somewhere in a federal office, a name I didn't know yet was being briefed on a widow who refused to be erased by paperwork. The screen lit again, one more text, shorter than a threat, longer than a plea. "Meet at the brasserie. 8 p.m. Trust me." I stared at the word trust until it lost its shape. Then I picked up my coat. The brasserie hummed like a hive that sold manners. Lydia and Grant were already staged, corner banquette, 2 untouched spritzes, a folder fat enough to pass for sincerity. Grant stood but didn't offer a hug. Lydia reached for my hand, then remembered I'd learned to keep both on the table. They spoke in the tone people use to sell smoothies and mergers. Lydia opened with regret shaped like a press release. Grant followed with solutions and a calm about consequences that didn't touch him. A laminated one-pager appeared. He slid it across like a life raft. The proposal was tidy and cruel. I would keep the house. I would keep $5. 6 million, pre-cleared and labeled clean. In exchange, I would help de-escalate, withdraw complaints, frame the motel as temporary safety, and sign a statement about a misunderstanding during grief. They'd coordinate a forfeiture package, select accounts, devices, a few bad apples they'd point to as the problem. In return, he said, informal assurances could be explored with prosecutors. He let the word immunity sit like a centerpiece. Grant pointed to bullet points with a pen that clicked at the wrong moments. He mentioned comfort language for banks, clarity for title, closure for the city. Lydia nodded on the beat. She'd drafted talking points for me: gratitude, family unity, a sentence about how concern can look clumsy. Her mouth made the word clumsy sound like charity. "Would you have taken the tidy money, swallowed the motel, and called it mercy?" They had a timeline, too: podcast interview next week, a friendly print piece the week after, a soft focus photo of me baking that I wouldn't be in. Lydia promised the internet will move on. Grant added that federal attention is a spotlight, best to dim it ourselves. He lowered his voice like the room was listening. I didn't argue. I let their script keep talking until it tripped. Grant referenced flows he didn't realize I'd already seen on Nadia's screen. He hinted at legacy complexities that could stain my name if I forced a fight. Lydia floated words like elder, confused, protect, as if invoking a spell that made theft look maternal. She said we could avoid ugly storms. The same weather Patricia had sold at my door now wore a younger face. I asked for a copy of the packet. Grant said yes before remembering he shouldn't. Lydia smiled like a shutter closing and said she'd summarize by email instead. I recorded her refusal in my head with a date and a time. Some evidence doesn't need a microphone, it needs a witness who refuses to blink. Grant leaned closer and tried frankness on for size. He spoke about a deal posture he believed existed right now, tonight, if I helped frame Thomas's consulting as overzealous optimization rather than crime. He said, softly, that prosecutors love clean narratives, and I was the only person who could deliver one they couldn't resist. He was selling my voice as a solvent. The waiter arrived with water and eyes that understood more than he would ever say. Lydia ordered for everyone in the vocabulary of restraint. I let the glasses sit. The ice cracked like an opinion. I told them I wanted time. I used words with knees: review, consider, confer. I kept my sentences short so mine couldn't be edited into theirs. Lydia softened, then sharpened. She tried my name like a lever. Grant flashed a deadline that didn't exist. The performance was smooth, and that was the tell. When the check came, their cards tried to be brave. The terminal beeped its small, honest beep. Declined. Grant laughed the way men laugh when a joke has ended badly. Lydia blamed the bank out loud and me with her eyes. I stood. The folder remained exactly where he had placed it, heavy with euphemisms. Lydia said there were better ways than calling strangers with badges. Grant added that family wins in private. I reached for my coat and answered without heat, my life would proceed in daylight. It sounded like I'd rehearsed, I hadn't. The line arrived because truth likes clean entrances. Outside, night air cleaned the taste of their plan from my mouth. Ogden Avenue moved like nothing had happened. Cars slid past, unaware of a price that had just failed to purchase a silence. I walked to my car and placed my phone face up on the passenger seat as if it were a witness, too. At the light, I texted Samuel one line, they offered $5 6M clean for my voice, and powered the message with a photo of the corner banquette. Then I sent Nadia a different line, you mentioned a federal contact. I'm ready. Her reply arrived while the light stayed red. A name and a number. No promises. No adjectives. Just an introduction to someone whose job wasn't to make me small. I drove home with the window cracked an inch, winter air needling my wrist awake. The house rose dark and intact against the sky, patient and unsentimental. Inside, I set my keys on the console, aligned the red folder with the edge, and breathed through the old habit of apologizing to furniture. In the hallway, the maple's shadow moved across the wall like handwriting learning its letters again. I listened to the heat click and settle. The quiet didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like staging. I opened my contacts, created a new entry, and typed the name Nadia had sent. Agent Dana Whitaker. I stared at it until the letters steadied. Then I tapped call, held the phone to my ear, and let the first ring travel towards someone whose voice, I hoped, would sound like a door opening. Agent Dana Whitaker answered on the first ring. No small talk, no drama, just a clear clock and a human voice. She told me where to come and how to walk in. Bring ID. Bring the red folder. Leave fear on the curb if it won't behave. Federal offices don't smell like TV. They smell like carpet glue and coffee that refuses to die. Dana met me in a hallway that didn't care who I had been yesterday. Mid-40s, hair pulled back like a plan, calm eyes that didn't try to comfort. She held the elevator button with her thumb and asked if I preferred water or silence. I picked silence. It felt honest. We sat in a room that belonged to no one and therefore to the government. She set out a recorder the size of a deck of cards, clicked a date that stamped time onto the air, and asked me to tell the truth slowly. I did. I walked her from suitcase wheels to motel flamingos, from Samuel's seal to Perez's calls, from Patricia's pearls to Nadia's arrows. She didn't interrupt. She edited only with her eyebrows. When I finished, she breathed once, like a swimmer deciding to turn and keep going. We can work with this, she said. Not praise, a plan. She explained lanes the way a surgeon explains anatomy without making it personal. Financial crimes. Forfeiture triggers. Parallel tracks with the U.S. attorney. I don't trade feelings, she said. I trade facts. Then she offered the thing that turns air into evidence. We can authorize a consensual recording, she said. One party, you, agrees to be recorded. We'll get the paper. You'll wear a device. You won't act, you'll live. They'll do the acting for us. She said it like a weather report. Her steadiness felt like oxygen. At 68, do you let fear pick your outfit? I agreed, out loud. The sound surprised me, mine, firm, not looking for anyone's permission. Dana slid a consent form in front of me. I read every line because I know what paper can do. I signed my name the way I did when I married Thomas, slowly, like a vow should be legible. A tech with gentle hands showed me the device, a small, flat button with a mind of its own. They placed it beneath my sweater, higher than my heartbeat, secured with tape that tugged skin and reminded me I was alive. The wire felt like a thin question under my collarbone. "Don't touch it," the tech said softly. "Forget it's there." Dana gave me rules that sounded like manners. "Keep it natural. Don't educate them, let them educate us. No leading questions, no legal advice. If you feel unsafe, say the phrase we agreed on and stand. If you need extraction, ask plainly for the restroom and walk. We'll be close enough to hear the ice in their glasses." She asked where they'd take a meeting quickly. "They like rooms with velvet and other people's money," I said. We picked a hotel lounge with carpet thick enough to swallow secrets and lighting that forgives faces. I texted Lydia 3 words, "We should talk." Her answer came before my phone finished buzzing. "Tonight. 7:30, the Harrington." Before I left, Dana handed me a card with her number written twice. "We won't be far," she said. "Say what you'd say if I didn't exist." I liked the boundary. I've spent a lifetime respecting lines other people forget to draw. Twilight held the city like a question. I dressed like a woman who had spent the day paying bills, nothing staged, nothing brave. The wire warmed against my skin, a quiet ember. Would you feel small with a piece of law on your rib cage, or would you feel tall? The Harrington's lounge looked like a memory of money. Brass that didn't apologize, chairs that decided your posture for you, a piano playing something expensive and barely there. Lydia saw me first and waved like we were in a commercial for forgiveness. Grant stood, jacket open for easy charm. The hostess led me to their corner. A small table waited between us like Switzerland. They opened with concern, as always, my well-being, the stress of public processes, the unfortunate misunderstanding with Mom's lodging. Lodging. They keep finding polite words for theft. I let the sentences spend themselves and watched their eyes for truth's pulse. Grant produced a new folder, sleeker, braver than the last. He called it framework and laid out parts like a magician showing you how honest the deck is. The numbers hadn't changed. House stays mine, $5. 6 million becomes clean. He added assurances language. He said his counsel could socialize with prosecutors. He referenced an immunity concept as if immunity were a canopy and not an instrument. Lydia nodded in rhythm, the way she nods when cameras like her. Then came the dirt they believed would scare me obedient. Lydia mentioned potential reputational headwinds connected to Thomas's firm. She said a journalist could draw lines between Friday deposits and Monday invoices. She floated a slide deck of contextualization, where words like optimization do the heavy lifting. Grant leaned in and let me know, in a whisper designed to perform intimacy, that he had contacts who could carry a narrative straight to the right desks, friends in compliance, friends who love a clean story. He meant pressure. He meant leverage. He said prosecutors prefer cooperation over confrontation and my voice could help them want the former. He was selling my grief as a product. I kept the surface calm. Beneath it, the wire listened like 1,000 quiet ears. He sketched a trade I already knew. I soften the story. They proffer a package that names harmless scapegoats and surrenders a handful of boutique accounts as if contrition could be curated. In exchange, we avoid the nuclear option, full forfeiture, headlines, raids. He didn't say what we both heard, blackmail wearing etiquette. I asked about the forged will. Lydia's smile splintered and fixed itself in one motion. She called it a working draft and misfiled. Grant blamed a junior notary who was no longer with the firm. The lie wore a name tag and tried to look helpful. They kept moving. Lydia described pathways back to dignity if we presented a united front. She even handed me phrases to say in potential interviews, what grief does to memory, how adult children can misread urgency. The script was kind enough to make the theft feel like an accident I should forgive in public. A waiter slid in, refilled water, pretended indifference. The ice cracked exactly when Grant mentioned Patricia's donor pressure, calls that could make an editor hesitate, calls that could make a foundation insist on a pause before writing my nonprofit's first check. He framed it as assistance. It sounded like weather again. Thomas wasn't perfect, Lydia added, softening her face for the piano. You know about his arrangements. She left the sentence sitting on the table, asking me to finish it with shame. The wire warmed like agreement. I refused the invitation out loud and inside my bones. Would you have cried then? Would you have given your memories a towel and apologized for the mess? I didn't. I asked them to put the proposal in writing, full terms, names, dates, the magic $5. 6 million spelled out letter by letter. Grant said counsel preferred oral outlines until temperature checks. Lydia said email leaves footprints that confuse people. The tells stacked like coasters. They leaned on urgency. Tonight would be best. Moral high ground erodes under bright lights. The window is open, Grant said, and I pictured his hands pushing me through it. I let the silence breathe, then used the phrase Dana and I had chosen for fear without panic. I should have brought apricots, I said, and stood as if to stretch. Lydia blinked. Grant frowned. Only the wire understood the sentence. I didn't leave. I poured water and watched the glass fog my fingerprints. The lounge's big door opened, a couple laughed too loud, the piano found a new key. Dana was somewhere I could not see, but the air felt taller. Lydia reached for my wrist, thought better of it, reached for her glass instead. Mom, she said, voice lacquered, trust us. This is how adults fix things. Adults. The word had a taste. I glanced at the folder and then at her. No more motel words, I said, gentle as a locked cabinet. If you want to fix something, start with the truth. Grant exhaled through his nose, impatient. He lowered his voice to a thread and said something small and sharp. If I didn't help, they'd have to reframe Thomas publicly, and a widow who fights the truth always looks messy. He let the word widow do the violence. The wire had what it needed. My hands were steady. Dana's number glowed in my pocket like a lighthouse through fabric. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. Somewhere beyond the velvet and brass, other hands were already on other doors. Bathroom? I asked, polite as an exit sign. Lydia nodded, confused by my courtesy. I stood, placed my purse over my shoulder, and moved slowly enough to give the moment its full weight. Halfway to the corridor, my phone vibrated once, no ringtone, no light, just that private tremor of a plan becoming visible. I turned back to our table, looked at the two people who had tried to convert love into leverage, and smiled the way winter smiles at glass. The lounge door opened again, and the room caught a different kind of quiet. Badges arrived before fear could organize. 2 agents crossed the velvet like gravity, calm and inevitable. The piano lost its courage mid-measure. Lydia froze in a smile that didn't know where to land. Grant tried to stand and found the air had rules. Good evening. Papers. A quiet announcement about a consensual recording and a lawful investigation. Phones were requested, then collected. The folder slid off the table with a sound like a card trick ending. Nobody raised a voice. They didn't need to. Law traveled on posture. Agent Whitaker touched my elbow like punctuation and led me past the bar. We moved through a service corridor that smelled like lemons and secrets. A door opened into a small room with no corners to hide in. The tech's hands were gentle. The wire came off my skin with a soft pull and a strip of warmth. He sealed it in a bag that snapped shut like certainty. Dana sat across from me, daylight dressed as a person. She clicked a recorder off, then on, then off again, and gave a nod that felt like a promise kept. The audio is clear, she said. Solicitation of a false statement. Obstruction themes. Extortion pressure. We'll keep stacking. Her tone made verbs feel like anchors. She poured water, set it near my hand, and let the room breathe once. Then she told me something that moved the floor. I can disclose this much, she said, voice steady. Your husband was a documented cooperating source with IRS-CI for 11 years. Payments to him were authorized. Some flows you've seen were cover mechanisms, approved and recorded. Your inheritance stands. The sentence rewired my body. Relief arrived first, sharp and clean. Grief followed, sudden and new, because the man I loved had been larger than my marriage and smaller inside it. In my head, October light touched his mouth again. The porch rail held him like a secret I had finally earned. Dana didn't rush the silence. She let it hold shape. Then she gave me the edges. Controlled accounts. Reimbursement codes. Memoranda with dates that matched the years we called late nights and client things. Confidential status still sealed, but validated within the walls that mattered. We are not pursuing forfeiture against your estate, she said. We will coordinate with the U.S. Attorney on the recording and the forged instrument. Separate lanes. You stay in yours. I nodded because words were suddenly too ceremonial. The room smelled like carpet glue and clean paper, and it felt kinder than any chapel. Nadia's arrows made new sense in my head, not innocence, not guilt, design, documented and disciplined. The maze had been bait. The map had been federal. A knock. An agent leaned in with a tablet and a short report. Lydia had asked for counsel and a sweater. Grant had asked for time and an explanation that would not be provided. Devices imaged. Files bagged. The brasserie returned to its expensive hum, but the corner banquette would never be the same again. Dana outlined next steps the way a pilot narrates a landing. I would provide a concise statement. Samuel would coordinate with her office on any estate questions. Detective Perez would own the local lane, eviction, forged will, misuse of utilities authority. Federal charges would focus on recording, wire, and financial crimes that belonged to the people who sold leverage as love. Do not talk to them, Dana said. Do not reply to anyone but your counsel. You're clear. Clear. The words settled into my bones like heat. I signed where paper required me to be visible. The pen felt honest. Dana walked me back through the corridor. The lounge looked slightly brighter, as if someone had lifted a filter. People were laughing again in that careful way city people laugh near power. I passed the corner where I had almost sold my voice for quiet and kept going. Outside, winter was charitable. Air moved through me like a rinse. A street violinist tuned in the distance, pulling one clean note until even traffic listened. I sat in my car and gripped the wheel the way you grip a railing after a storm moves off. My phone vibrated with restrained efficiency. Samuel, call me when home. Perez, we're good. Sleep. Nadia, a thumbs up followed by 3 words, precise and kind, knew he was bigger. I drove Riverbend slow, past porches with yellow light and families practicing peace. The maple reached across my facade like a blessing that didn't need permission. Inside, the house felt wider. I put the red folder on the table and touched it the way people touch a doorframe when they enter a room that finally knows them. In the study, I opened the window an inch and let the night have a voice. The legal pad lay where I'd left it, the word library underlined twice like a promise. I wrote 2 new lines beneath it, letters steady and simple, Elder Justice Initiative. Endowment, $17 million. The number didn't reach for attention. It just took its seat. How do you grieve a man you just met? I set my phone to charge and stood in the hallway where the house holds its breath before sleep. I thought about Lydia's face when the world told her no and meant it. I thought about Grant's pen clicking like a nervous metronome. I thought about Patricia's pearls counting power and found them suddenly silent. In the mirror, I looked like a woman whose life had been picked up and set down in the right place. The lines around my mouth were not forgiveness. They were architecture. I turned off lamps in rooms that were mine again and let darkness do its work without theater. Upstairs, the quilt held my weight like a promise that knows its job. I whispered Thomas's name once, not as a plea, but as a thank you I didn't entirely understand yet. Sleep found me quickly, practical and firm, like a good lawyer. Morning would ask for renovation plans, board searches, bylaws, and boundaries that could stand without offense. Tonight only asked for breath. I gave it freely and closed my eyes as the house counted with me, one quiet number after another, toward the life I was finally prepared to build. 7 months later, my house laughs out loud. The walls were warm white, not gallery ice. The den breathes through French doors. The maple taps spring on the glass like an old friend who finally remembers the way home. I walk barefoot across wood that forgives, coffee in a sturdy mug Thomas pretended not to like. Paperwork turned into architecture. The dining room became a library with lamps that make evening gentle. A chair that forgives knees waits by the window. I read case summaries there, quiet, dense pages about how money tries to steal elders' names and how we take those names back. The silence is not empty, it is earned. The Elder Justice Initiative lives 2 blocks away in a sunlit storefront. 17 million sits behind it like calm ballast. Bylaws are inked. A Real board meets and argues well. Our first grant bought a laptop for a woman whose son took hers 4 updates and never returned it. Our second paid a lawyer to file the word dignity where it should have been all along. I sign letters with a pen that doesn't shake. Maya Brooks called in May and asked to talk about systems, not gossip. I agreed. One interview, filmed in the library with the maple doing what trees do, standing. She let me skip the motel and the lemons. She framed the story as a warning and a map. When the piece aired, my face was small and the phone lines were large. Strangers sent stories that sounded like mine until the consonants changed. The cases move like weather reports written by clocks. Local charges where they belong. Federal files where they fit. I attend what I must and nothing more. Agent Whitaker texts only when necessary, short notes that feel like pillars. Detective Perez leaves voicemails that sound like checked boxes. Samuel sends the occasional period. A good team knows when to be quiet. Renovation finished the same week a mediator emailed an invitation to discuss family healing. Lydia's name sat in the subject line like a test I no longer needed to take. She wanted a meeting, a script, a soft photo somewhere with brick and ivy. I declined with a sentence shaped like a door. When adults choose honesty without leverage, I'll listen over coffee. Not a performance, not a deadline. A table with 2 mugs and no folder between us. A photo arrived from my son-in-law's number and then disappeared, grandchildren at a museum, all elbows and light. I did not answer the number that sent it. I mailed 2 tickets to a children's concert to their house with a note written to them, not through anyone. If you ever want to see the maple, ask your parents to text Samuel. Adults first. Door open, lock working. The house hosts people now. Volunteers drink bad coffee and good tea and practice phone calls to banks who forgot their manners. A retired notary teaches everyone how stamps should look when they tell the truth. Nadia stops by to borrow sunlight and, sometimes, to leave it behind. We keep a red folder in a glass case by the door. It is empty and labeled, "Never again." Visitors smile. Some cry. Mostly, they breathe. I found one more thing in Thomas's desk when we moved the study to face the tree. A single line, folded twice, written in his tidy hand for a day I guess he imagined and hated. If the math ever scares you, Evelyn, tell the truth louder. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't theater. It was him, practical and brave, a compass I already carried. On Saturday mornings, I walk past the Harrington and don't look inside. The piano still plays something expensive and forgettable. Across the street, a violinist chooses a single note and holds it until traffic listens. I put $5 in the case, not because he needs me, but because some sounds deserve company. People ask if I've forgiven anyone. I tell them forgiveness is a room with a door I own. Sometimes I open it an inch to let the air change. Sometimes I keep it shut and sit with the quiet. Isn't that what justice finally feels like, choosing when the door moves? At night, I turn off lamps in rooms that know my name. The maple throws soft shadows across the floor like cursive in a language I'm learning late and well. I stand at the threshold, hand on the frame, and thank the house for its patience. Thomas's photo watches without judgment. The clock ticks like a witness with no bias. I didn't get my old life back. I built one that doesn't ask permission.